Social Justice Podcast.
You're listening to a social justice podcast hosted by Nicola Spurling, brought to you by The Flag Shop, and inspired by a social justice coloring book. Hello, this is a social justice podcast. I'm your host, Nicola Spurling, and today I'm joined by Tosaint Ricketts and Jennifer Scott for a conversation about the Whitecaps and about professional sports organizations and how they give back to community. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Jennifer, can we start with you introducing yourself?
My name's Jennifer Scott. My pronouns are she, her. I've been with the Whitecaps for 3 years now. I'm the VP of Community Social Impact. And really, we have sort of two buckets of work at the club. The first one is to bring as many people into the Whitecaps to experience the magic of soccer. And our department, which Tosaint is a part of, is really focused on priority communities, including New Canadians, the Pride community, Indigenous children and youth, and really allow them to experience the magic of soccer on really our province's biggest scale. We can always put our best foot forward. We still know that barriers will exist and not everyone can come through BC Place. And so we have a range of programs that really bring the Whitecaps into community, hopefully being invited in to deliver soccer in community on their terms, on their turf.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Tosaint?
Yeah, so I'm Tosaint Ricketts. My role with Whitecaps is Liaison of Club and Player Engagement. I was a former professional soccer player, represented the Canadian men's national team over 60 times. I joined Whitecaps in 2019 and then retired at the beginning of 2023. And my role in Whitecaps, I work in the same department as Jen Scott. Essentially, I work with the first team players. I help them get better connected with community and do it on their terms, but in an organic way. You know, a lot of player involvement involves the understanding of what they're doing, what it means, the impact they can have. So I like to have those conversations with them, make them fully understand the impact they have and how they can use their platform to impact our market in a genuine and obviously impactful way. So yeah, I bounce around from department to department, but I'm in my second full year now. On the other side, I call it the other side of being a professional athlete. But yeah.
Wonderful. And for a little bit of context, we're talking about the Whitecaps. Not all of our listeners are going to know what the Whitecaps are, whether they're from Vancouver and just not paying attention to soccer or they're from somewhere else. But can you provide some context? What is the organization? How did it come to exist?
Oh, well, we're a professional soccer team. We play in the league, Major League Soccer, which is an American league, but there are 3 Canadian teams, us, Toronto, and Montreal. And yeah, I mean, we're a pillar in the community. We're currently having a great season, but we're a professional soccer team in Vancouver.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I'll just add beyond the men's team, we also have a whole suite of academy teams on both the men's and the women's side. We run soccer programming across the country with academy centers from BC all the way out to the East Coast and in Halifax and farther. And beyond that, we are one of the first 2 clubs to commit to Project 8, which is the women's domestic program. And so absolutely, our men's first team is our strongest, most visible program, but our club invests and builds soccer really from coast to coast.
Right. And taking a look at the website, I see that on December 11th, 1973, Danny Beach and Herb Capozzi, I'm pronouncing those names roughly correctly, officially announced the Vancouver Whitecaps franchise on the top floor of a downtown Vancouver Davie Street hotel as the club began its life in the original North American Soccer League, NASL. So my understanding is the leagues have sort of switched a few times since then. Is that right?
Yeah. Like you said, we started in the NASL. We won the Super Bowl there. We're very successful. There were teams like Metro Stars and, a lot of big teams, but the team has evolved since then. Major League Soccer was announced. We joined Major League Soccer in 2011, I believe. And yeah, that's brought us to now. We're in our 50th year as a club. This year is our 50th anniversary. So you may see like our jerseys and the color in the gold accents and the big activations and big games that we've been having. But we have some of the deepest history in North America in terms of a soccer team. 50 years is expanse, and there's been a lot of change over the time, but the club has steadily grown over those years.
Amazing. And when did the Whitecaps start getting involved in addressing social issues? I mean, that's sort of what this podcast is about. It's a social justice podcast. We try to address social issues. And in this season, we've been primarily focusing on local organizations that give back to society. And I know the Whitecaps do that. So I'm curious to know how that all began and when that started.
It's a great question. I know particularly on the Pride side, we're this year going into having, will be our 11th annual Pride match. So I can say we've actively been supporting and driving that conversation from the soccer lens in the community for 11 years. I think we are one of the first professional clubs, although it is really hard to verify that, but we'll say we're one of the first. So that's been a long-standing area of focus. I've been with the club for 3 years, and I think when I came into the club, it was really clear that there needed to be some organization and some strategy behind how we engage with the community, so it is consistent. So there's a point of contact and really a way that can help the organizations that support us, that partner with us, as well as the players, have a way to really elevate their voice and make sure we're being as effective as possible. So I would say sometimes the club leads that conversation, like that is a club voice, but many other times it's the players, right? That there's a particular cause that is important for them. And Tosaint and our other teams will work with them to make sure if they want to say something, that they're being really clear with their message, that it's being put out there in a way that reflects their position and their values. And so that certainly predates me being at the club for 3 years, but I know that there's been a renewed focus over the past 3 years.
Right.
I joined the club in 2019, and I bounced around many clubs in the world. I played in Israel, I played in Turkey, I played in Norway, I've played in a lot of clubs. But when I came here and seen the emphasis on community, the emphasis on giving back, it inspired me as a player, and that's probably why I'm in this role now. But being able to have the flexibility, being able to have the resources to go out in your community, use your platform for change, use your platform to inspire and promote good values. Those are the experience I've had since joining the club in 2019, and it's only got more impactful and more inspiring and more resources behind it. And the players are fully aboard and wanting to make that impact as well. So, I mean, I can't say when it started, but since I've been here, it's been a primary focus of the club.
Right. I mean, that's amazing that you give players the opportunity to come to the organization and say, okay, we want to deal with this social issue and give them a platform to do that. What is the mechanism for allowing them to do that? Is there a sort of a direct liaison person between, I guess, the heads of the organization and the players? I
mean, I guess that's kind of me. I am the liaison of club and player engagement, and I was once a player. So, I speak the language, I speak the voices of the players, but also help them get educated, provide them with opportunities to meet people in the community, to meet people from different demographics and different backgrounds and different struggles, and understand what they're going through, because oftentimes players want to help, they want to use their platform, but it just takes a little push. It takes a little bit of education and understanding. And that's what we give our players, and they've embraced it. And now they're running off on their own, wanting to do their own change and make their own impacts.
Wow. And
some of it's asking the questions ahead of time, right? Understanding who the player is, what is their path before they arrived at the Whitecaps, right? Understanding if there's issues or causes that are near and dear to them. So, for example, last year we knew we had a handful of players that really comfortable speaking about mental health. So then, when there was an opportunity for us to use to really align with one of our partners on an initiative, we already knew which players would be receptive to that. So we could say, hey, earlier this season, you had mentioned this, or we've had an ongoing conversation about this. Would you be willing to participate in XYZ? And so having those conversations beforehand really helps. So you're not sitting, you're not reactive, but you know what is really going to resonate.
And is the opposite true, where you'll sometimes have players come to you and say, I really want to talk about this issue, and you go, oh, hold on a second, that's not going to represent the organization well? Or are the players pretty aligned with the organization most of the time?
I would say I've never encountered a situation where we don't support the player and what they want to say. Maybe it'll be like helping them understand the best way to say it, or the right way to say it, or who to help them say it, or her. But never encountered a situation where we're like, no, don't say that.
Right. And do you also take feedback from I guess, outsiders, like your fans? Are your fans coming to you saying, we really need you to talk about this issue or support us in this way?
Yeah, I would say we like to have our finger on the pulse of the market and the community, and really try to align with those that are in need or those that need help. Anyone approaches a club and has a issue or problem or something they want to amplify or get out there, we're willing to work with everyone in that sense. I don't know if you can add to that.
Only to say that that's where being proactive also helps, like having existing relationships. So with different community groups and nonprofit groups or nations, whatever it may be. So you're hopefully plugged into conversations beforehand. And so if something does come up, there is just, it's additive to an existing conversation. And those groups then trust the club that if they provide, if they make recommendations or have suggestions for us, that it's going to be heard, and hopefully be able to mobilize on that. And sometimes we have the conversation around if there is something happening in the community and it maybe isn't for the club to speak on it just because we don't have that expertise, or it's not for necessarily our voice that will help the conversation, and we don't have a player that is necessarily aligned with that. And again, it might not be the more authentic and organic voice. Then it's also a pause for the club, and we have the conversation of, well, if it's not representing the players and it's not right from the club, probably best to allow others to speak to it. So it doesn't mean that we're being silent on the issue, but it's actually letting the people that are most informed and closest to it share that stage, and centering those voices rather than our own. Like sometimes being quiet is the most important part, and allowing those louder voices to really take the stage and grab the mic.
Right. And have you had instances where members of the public have pushed back on stances that you've taken, whether you're in the right and they just don't like it, or you kind of take that to heart and go, well, maybe we should have taken a different stance? Or maybe it's just people that are criticizing you because of their perception of what your motives are. Are those challenges that you've had to deal with?
I mean, as a pro sport club, we're going to get criticism. I mean, not for performance, for, coaching decisions, tactical. So like, I think we're pretty accustomed to taking criticism. It's part of the gig. I will say there are times absolutely where we've taken a stand, or particularly last year in our 10th anniversary Pride match, we had a massive drag performance. It closed down a city block. It was a party, but it was a political statement, but in a way that was reflective of who we are as a club. And yeah, it was all over social. We got a lot of media interest, and of course that brings criticism. But it was very clear from our ownership and our CEO that is fine. We are willing to take that criticism because we are taking a stand and doing the right thing. And we are supporting a community that has supported us for decades. Like soccer doesn't exist without the Pride community, without gay individuals, right? So knowing that we had that support at that level, it allowed us to, brush off criticisms when they did come in. And really, I think it's important not to hear those voices louder than the ones that are in your club that want you to take a stand on issues that impact the Pride community, that want you to show up for them, right? And so those are not equal voices. I think you follow those who have been with you, those supporters, those fans who want you to show up for the Pride community. That's the voice you listen to, much louder than the criticisms, which are going to happen, and that's okay. That's part of it.
And I mean, I'm a queer soccer player, and we host this podcast on a site called fabulouslyqueer.ca. So I'm particularly curious to know sort of what sparked the Whitecaps Pride Advisory Committee, which I know was recently formed, how you went about recruiting for that committee, which I'm obviously a member of. So I heard about it through community, and I'm curious sort of how else you reach people.
Yeah, great question. So the genesis of the advisory group was, I think it was really the next chapter for us. That, as I said, we've been participating in and leading Pride celebrations for 10 years. But I think what will elevate it further was more input from Pride community and creating a platform and a venue for a wide range of those voices to contribute to what we're doing, and providing that feedback that, are we showing up in the right way? Are we showing up in the way the community wants us to show up? And we were also doing everything on our terms, which is, not true partnership. So how do we show up in community? And I think that was the missing piece. And so creating an advisory group that opens that door for conversation and feedback and information sharing was really what was going to allow us to continue to grow. And so we really started the group. We reached out to a lot of the pride organizations across the Lower Mainland, up into the city of Squamish, out into the valley. We had extended invites to those groups in the previous Pride match, so hopefully there was a bit of back and forth already, but just saying this is the opportunity. We reached out to some of our sport partners. So Out for Kicks has, had a partnership with the club for a long time. We also work with iSpark, which is Indigenous Sport and Recreation Council. We reached out to them. We also reached out to the host nations and opened the door for them to participate. And then we just knew that there was particular champions of this cause or in the community that we wanted this to be on their radar. If they didn't have, space, time, capacity, that they could certainly spread it within their networks. That we got a good, really impressive group of individuals and leaders come forward through that. And then we were able to bring some individuals that had participated in our academy program. And just recently, we have one of the alumni of our women's programming joining. So really, we were trying to create space that all these different voices and that have different experiences through soccer, and some that have not always felt welcome in soccer, but want to create those bridges. And so we've only had preliminary conversations, and I think the real work is ahead of us. But really encouraged by the conversations we've had in such a short amount of time. And yes, there's the conversations we will have as a big group. However, it also starts a lot of side conversations, right? And just saying like, hey, we have this, or we have this opportunity, and just more information sharing. So that's been the genesis of it. Really, really looking forward to what it accomplishes over, say, the next season or two.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible the amount of people that you managed to collect for that committee. I don't know if collect's the right word to use, but from personal experience, I've tried putting committees together, especially queer-related committees, and it can be a struggle at times. Everyone has limited capacity, and so I think you've done an incredible job of bringing together a really good group of people that can advise the organization. And I know that another thing the organization really cares about is supporting youth. So can you maybe talk about why it's important to provide opportunities for youth to play soccer?
Wow. I mean, it's a big question. It's a meaningful question for me as well, because growing up when I was trying to pursue this professional career, become a soccer player, I didn't have that much support from my community. I didn't have the infrastructure. I didn't have many places to play. I didn't have any groups that were like trying to come down to on my terms and my level to try to get me into sport. It only happened when a friend's mom decided to start taking me to the games and really dedicate her time to bringing me into sport. So that's kind of where my passion lies in all this. But, it's the future. We think about the humans who are going to be molding our country, who's going to be molding our environment and really, creating a good life for us. And that's what's important, And that's what our passion is, getting players out there, speaking to kids, inspiring, going to schools, going to hospitals, just really getting out there and using our voice to help inspire and just create future leaders. It's really just comes down to the essence of inspiring kids, and that's what it means to me. And, Jen could talk more about it, but it's truly special.
The one thing I didn't fully appreciate when I started working at the Caps was just how accessible soccer is, right? As in, if we have a gymnasium, if we have a gravel pitch, if we have a beautiful like lawn or turf or what have you, like we can deliver a soccer program in that space. And so with that creates this huge opportunity of really where we can go, where we can bring soccer to the youth across this province and farther. And when I say the word obligation, I use that in like a really positive intonation, but it's our obligation to go. We have the benefit of this platform. We have so much visibility that it is our obligation to go into communities and really create as many opportunities for kids to play soccer. And when you look at the population, right? You think of like new Canadians coming into BC. You look at the Indigenous community of like how popular soccer is in Indigenous communities, particularly like Coast Salish or in southwest corner of the province. It is one of the most popular sports. So that just creates so many opportunities for us to go in and hopefully have a positive impact on them. More often than not, we come in maybe once or twice. So we're not going to be able to like continue the programming forever. But if we can be that spark, or we can reignite a spark that they had that maybe they lost, but maybe us showing up with some players and our mascot Spike and can get them back into soccer, terrific. But honestly, if we can even just get them playing sport, any sport, right? Like that's an ultimate goal. Hope it's soccer, but kids that are leading healthy, active lives, developing skills, as well as some skills to deal with mental health challenges, like that is really what drives us with the community department.
And you've had a lot of interest, I'm guessing, from youth wanting to be part of the organization or part of the club?
Yeah, I mean, our academies span like across the entire country from, and kids are desperate to get into our program, desperate to get into Vancouver and really perform and, maybe become a professional soccer player one day. But even at the grassroots level, like if you see the joy and when we come out there and the expressions on their faces and what it means to them, it goes a long way. And, it could be a conversation. It could be a little bit of advice. It could be a little bit of encouragement, but it goes a long way. And you don't know how it could affect someone's life. You don't know what they're going through, but it's just that little drop of inspiration that could be all the difference for an individual. And that's what it's about. It's about just giving back and just helping one life at a time. That's what sport does. It brings people together. It creates good values, it prepares people for the future. It teaches very, very important life skills and, it's special getting out there and impacting the kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to when I was in high school, I played in a soccer team and there was an opportunity to have a scrimmage against the Whitecaps is sort of how it was framed. And I don't know exactly what that was. I don't know where those people that we were scrimmaging against came from, but just the association with the name Whitecaps was something that was huge, right? That really motivated us and went, wow, we could really, make something of this sport, right? And so that was a big motivating factor in continuing on in the sport. And I'm curious to know about, yes.
If I can add, so we have one of our grassroots programs and we're thankfully recipient of a grant. And at the end of the school year, we will have delivered programming for 30,000 kids across BC. And one of like the most, obviously can't be there all the time, but when you do go and you wear the Whitecaps crest and you walk into the school, like these kids think you are a professional soccer player, right? So we'll go in with community coaches that are really like grassroots recreation focused, but they're wearing the Whitecaps gear. Our videographers are wearing the Whitecaps gear, and we're all getting asked for autographs. And it is lovely for the ego. It has been a long time since I've played any sport with any sort of like skill or athleticism. But to your point, it's the power of the club and what that means to these kids, that they just think everyone that walks in is that sort of like professional athlete. And, we're getting asked for multiple autographs from every single group of kids that cycle through the program.
Amazing. And you talked about how soccer is really big in Indigenous communities, particularly in the West Coast here. So what are you doing to sort of reach out to those communities and bring them into your organization?
We've done so much. I mean, the biggest thing, because my thing is infrastructure. If kids don't have places to play, it's tough. You can't envision yourself becoming a professional if you're not kicking the ball in the goal and, playing unstructured soccer, I call it. So the one thing we do is go out into these remote communities and build mini pitches, infrastructure where kids can play freely. There's lights there so they can play throughout the night. There's nets there so they can pretend, put someone in goal, hit the back of the net. But the biggest thing is just providing a place where they can play. And, that is huge. It's big for the growth of soccer. It's big for these communities that, don't have all the resources that we have here in downtown Vancouver, So for me, that has been the most impactful from my experience over the few years that I've been with the club on the community side.
And speaking of getting people involved in soccer and providing those opportunities. There was recently legislation put forward by the BC Conservatives that would have prevented, had it passed, trans women, trans girls from competing in sports. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts on that legislation are.
Yeah, it's disappointing. The first person that I thought of was Quinn, who plays on the national team. I think was the first trans individual to win a gold medal at the Olympics, right? And like what their contributions to sport is. It's deeply disappointing. I was really relieved to hear that it was, I don't know the proper government terms, it was shot down very quickly. When we're talking about creating all those access points for children and youth in soccer, to put more barriers, right? Especially kids that are trying to figure out who they are or trying to express who they are. Sport can be a wonderful outlet or way to express themselves, but putting more barriers and really reducing opportunities is counterintuitive to what we want to see in sport in general and soccer specifically.
I'm a hopeful optimist, so there's no way this is going to happen. This bill's not going to get passed, so I expected this outcome. But like Jen said, like, let's limit the barriers, let's increase the access, and let's just do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's incredibly disappointing because the party that put it forward is sort of polling quite high right now. We have an election coming up, and so this is sort of becoming a wedge issue almost in the lead up to an election, which is really sad to see because, as you point out, it's all about creating opportunity. And most of the time we're talking about recreational sports where these types of things don't really matter all that much. People just want to get out there and have fun, right? And I know for my recreational soccer team that I play on, Quinn is one of the top players. That we did a round circle of everyone saying who their favorite player was, and I would say half the team said Quinn is my favorite player, right? So these are people to look up to, not people to bar from sports. And when it comes to the Whitecaps Girls Academy, do you allow trans girls in that?
Yeah, I don't know offhand, but I know we would ultimately be following what Canada Soccer, like their rules as it aligns with FIFA. That's why I believe Quinn plays on the women's national team, just given the policy that they've set out.
And Tosaint, you played professional soccer before entering your current role, and we know that leagues like the NHL, for instance, they've never had a player or a coach come out as gay. And I know that can be a big problem in any sport, but I think the NHL stands out in having absolutely no one that's come out. So I'm curious around your thoughts about culture, diversity, and inclusion in professional soccer. Is that a welcoming and an inclusive environment? Is it really difficult if you're a marginalized person to maybe come out as gay or anything else?
It's a tough question. Soccer is it's a world sport. Every country plays, different regions, different cultures, different religions. So I can't speak on soccer as a whole, but all the environments that I've been in have been quite welcoming. I've never encountered a situation where a player has a cultural stance, a cultural belief, they identify as a certain way, be excluded from the environment. I've never encountered that situation, but soccer is a global sport. For me, it's the most welcoming sport. Obviously, it has its faults. If you see in the news where there's a lot of racism in certain areas, but for me, that comes down to it's a regional thing, it's a country thing, it's a religion thing. But I haven't really encountered any situations where somebody was excluded from the team because of their political, religious, any type of stance. For me, diversity and inclusion is soccer. If you look at our dressing room here at Whitecaps, we have 13, 14 different countries represented in one roster. We're talking 23 players, and we have players from Norway, Austria, Jamaica. We have players from all over that represent our locker room, and that's the beauty of soccer. It's the world sport. Everyone can play. Everyone is included, and it's very, very diverse. And I have yet to encounter a situation where someone's excluded because of anything outside of their skill level.
Right. That's fantastic to hear. And I know that you volunteered with Black Players for Change for a number of years. So can you talk about what you and the organization were trying to achieve when it came to that work?
that came down to just using my platform for change, you know, in times of, you know, civil unrest or, you know, political tension or cultural tension, or it takes someone brave enough to step up and use their platform and help educate those around them. So, you know, going into it, obviously I'm Black, you know, I've experienced a lot of racism, experienced a lot of discrimination and systematic racism. But it was new to me to use my platform and really step up and lead a team. And, you know, I took that risk. I used my platform. I educated the players around me. You know, I put myself on the front lines and I did it for growth. You know, I did it for the little kid that looks like me, that is scared to speak up and fight for who he is and to love who he is or who she is. Yeah, that's why I did it. And I look back now and it's I'm so proud, you know, because I know the players around me grew from it. You know, they're put in uncomfortable situations where they have to really test who they are, you know, and speak up as well. And that's what it's about. You know, it's about using your platform for better. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes there's pressure that comes with it and you may make mistakes, but somebody has to step up. So that was my motivation doing it. And, you know, I look back and I'm proud, very proud.
If I can add, like part of TOS's leadership also includes like really positioning education as a way to drive that conversation. So pretty regularly, especially around these causes, we bring people into the first team environment to share their lived experiences. As Tos was mentioning, we have people that are coming from really across the globe that may not know the nuances of this conversation, right? Like thinking specifically around the lived experience of Indigenous people, the past and the current lived experiences. And so making sure that we bring people in that can share that their experiences, share some perspectives, explain the why behind sometimes what the club is doing. Like, why is it important that, you know, we're celebrating Pride? Why do they have such an important element of that activation, right? What are their opportunities to use their voice? And so we've had a number of like education sessions. The first team has been incredibly open to it. It's something we plan to continue. We're lining them up again for this upcoming season. And really a credit to TOS to really make that a core part of what we do from the community lens and that connection into the players.
Fantastic. And Jennifer, you mentioned that you approached your previous position with Sport Burnaby by focusing on meeting a triple bottom line of social benefit, sport benefit, and economic benefit. And I'm curious if that has transferred over to the Whitecaps. Are those still the three things that you're trying to bring to the organization?
I would say I don't need to focus on the economic benefit anymore. Before I was working in tourism. So certainly accountable to the tourism partners on that front, and bringing events in that would then bring people who would stay in hotels, eat at restaurants and what have you. Thankfully, there are terrific teams that are knowledgeable and have more expertise in professional sports. We rely on that. But truly, like that sport benefit and that community benefit, that social benefit is what we do. And it doesn't matter how successful the Whitecaps first team is if the community doesn't feel a part of it, right? To feel that connection. And so that's our responsibility, is to ensure the community can see themselves reflected in the club so we can share that success.
And that must be sort of freeing in some ways. I know with my role at the Flag Shop, which is where we host this podcast, I don't have to focus on bringing money in as much as I am just trying to give back to community. It's other people who are focused on the money side of things, and that gives me the freedom to address these social issues and try to do what I think is right, as opposed to trying to sort of balance, well, I think this is right, but maybe that's going to cost the organization some money. And do you find that gives you a sense of freedom?
There's a freedom with it, but I would also say we've the programs that we've built are actually some of the ones that are incredibly attractive to corporate partners, right? They also know to be in this space, they are also required to give back. And So we don't build the programs for that purpose, but if we're building the programs correctly and they're having this impact, they will be, desirable to potential corporate partners or grant allocations. So thankfully, there is a benefit to it, but it's certainly not what drives us. The programs, initiatives need to have that community impact first. Hopefully, they are scalable. And then if community partners are also on board with that, it aligns with their values, what they want their impact to be, fantastic. Like that I guess we do hit that triple bottom line, but it's certainly not the driver.
I'll add to that just from the player lens is that, when we step out in BC Place on the weekend, there's 30,000 people there watching, and then they're there supporting, spending their money, taking their time to support these players, to help them, will them on to win games. In turn, they must go in their community and give back. That's how you enable the art. That's how you get people in the stadiums outside of results. That's how that's how the community really connects with players on a human level rather than a jersey number and a last name. And that's what the game's about. If you really want that support and that unconditional support, you got to impact people's lives and win in a full way. And that's more than scoring goals and winning games. That's going to the food bank and giving back there. That's going to local organizations and speaking to the kids, going to schools, that's going to the BC Children's Hospital and really seeing the kids there and helping them. And it's, that's what it's about. It's reciprocal. So yeah, just as a player, and that was my motivation. I always wanted to give back to those who spend their time and money supporting me.
Right. And that kind of seems like the best of both worlds. You get to do all of this work to give back, and in turn, the organization benefits. And so everyone's really benefiting from it. And in 2021, MLS Next announced a series of initiatives aimed at addressing racism, hate, and discrimination, and advocating for social justice in the sport of soccer. So can you speak to how that work is progressing, if you know, and how that aligns with the Whitecaps work?
That's a good question. MLS Next is our second team, and they do a lot of things in line with MLS and their values. We're not, me personally, I'm not in tune with everything MLS Next is doing. I don't know if you have anything to add with that, Jen.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of education measures and training that takes place at for that second team. And then we also have somebody in-house. We have a director of Safe Sport and Education, and her full responsibility is to work with all the academy programs to really work on safe sport conversations, understanding what is appropriate behavior, appropriate language, what they should expect from coaches, from other players. So there are league initiatives, but then there's also ones that we drive in-house. Sometimes things need to be specific to the Canadian context as well, and make sure that we're having the right conversation with Canadian youth and to complement any training that they're getting from the league.
Right. Yeah, that's an important point to make. Coming back to what you'd said at the beginning, this is primarily an American or U.S.
Yeah. We've done some training in the past, and just little things where they're like, oh, well, what's your zip code, right? And when you start your training with that, you're like, oh, okay, we've got to make sure that it's Canadian focused and Canadian centered.
And do you find that there are more similarities than differences when you're dealing with the MLS League, or are there quite big differences between the US and Canada?
I think it overlaps in really different ways because there's 3 Canadian teams with Toronto and Montreal, but then the context originally from Toronto, Tosses from Edmonton, the Vancouver landscape is very specific to Vancouver, right? So it wouldn't even translate very well over to Toronto, doesn't transfer over to Montreal. So there's pockets within the Canadian one, but then I think sometimes we would align more closely with Seattle and Portland, right? It just in terms of that Pacific corridor. So I don't think it's necessarily Canada-US, but just every single issue, there's maybe a different alignment just based on the specific conversation and the geopolitical and historical context.
Mm-hmm. It seems like your fans really support what you're doing, whether it's on the field or off the field. There's sort of this cult following in some ways, right? There's these groups, from what I understand, at the stadiums that are cheering on, and they have their own sort of cultures within themselves. And then you have the Pride game where you bring in all these queer people. So That's pretty amazing to see. Is there anything that you want to talk about with regard to sort of the support that you get from your fans?
I'll just say it's inclusive, like there's nothing that we really bring into our stadium, any initiatives where fans are like, no, we cannot do this. It's a very welcoming environment, and we have 5 main supporter groups. We have the Southsiders, we have Rain City Brigade, we have the Sisters, we have the Albion, which is a group of high school kids. We have the Prawn-siders, and they support everything we do and take it even a step further and do their own things in their own way and bring in their own people. So in terms of just that, it's pretty welcoming. I don't know what else to add.
I kind of have my own sense of what that is, having attended games, but recognizing that our audience isn't all from Vancouver, they probably don't necessarily understand that culture around those games. And what is your hope for the future of the Whitecaps? Thinking kind of specifically around social issues that you want to address. Obviously, you're starting with this Pride Advisory Committee, and you have a vision for where that is going to go. But I'm sure there's other initiatives that you're looking at taking on. So where are you hoping that trajectory goes?
Well, we also have a South Asian advisory group as well. So a different composition, right? And a different path to building out that group. But the same idea is, we know the South Asian community, like soccer, is one of the highest sports they participate in. So how do we make sure that's reflected through the club? So really excited for that piece. I personally really excited to see when Project 8 comes online, because that'd be like, you see the success of the PWHL, the WNBA, and that coming to Toronto. So I think that is just such an exciting conversation, an overdue conversation to be a part of. And I think there's just such an incredible opportunity for Vancouver to really run with this and rally behind that program. And then we have FIFA right around the corner. And, that always brings a specific conversation and lens to social justice issues, considering where things have been hosted in the past, what different policies look like. I think there is a real opportunity for Canada, US, Mexico to show what an inclusive environment can look like at World Cups. And so I know those aren't Whitecaps specific, but just looking at the soccer landscape more broadly, those are some really, really big milestones. That's a really good question. I think really it really becomes the player-driven side. I think we have all the support that we would need from a front office and from ownership and CEO to really run with this. And we're often being pushed like, can we do more? Can we do more? And so I think progressing on that and building on all the voices that we're bringing into the club through these community groups to really hear that and say, we can certainly do all, these things and run with it. And then hopefully those groups feel that ownership and they become champions of it, right? If you've contributed those ideas, you've been at the table driving for it, then, I'm excited to see those individuals then become champions of the communities and maybe become their own supporter groups. But Toss, I'm sure you have a totally different lens to that.
Well, I'm just going to talk about soccer in general. I want Whitecaps, first of all, to win MLS Cup, be the best team in MLS, but just from a soccer in Canada standpoint, I just want to see the game push forward. I want to see more opportunities for kids. I want to see legacy built. I'm talking like infrastructure. My biggest thing is when I drive through BC, when I drive through Vancouver and I see the empty fields outside of school, I'm like, why isn't there a mini pitch there? Why isn't there better sport infrastructure so these kids can really cultivate their skills, play unstructured soccer, and really just grow sport across not only Vancouver, but across the country. Like I said, I didn't have many opportunities growing up from the grassroots level. So my goal in all this is to create more opportunities for kids to maybe make it to where I made it, or just improve their life through sport. I want Whitecaps to be, and we kind of are right now, but I want Whitecaps to be the pillar of the community when it comes to values, promoting the right things, inspiring, motivating, and really being that pillar in the community. So we're well on our way there, and everyone is committed. Like Jen said, from the top down, everyone is very committed and is passionate about it. And, it makes me proud to be a part of this club. And I just hope we continue on the same trajectory and keep impacting our community in a positive way.
And I mean, I think that infrastructure piece is so important. Trying to book fields in Vancouver these days, there's nothing really available. It's difficult to find times. You're having to play or practice at really inconvenient times. And it seems like there's not a lot of focus on building out that infrastructure. Do you know what's being done to better that?
I mean, I've been in many conversations with the people that are bringing FIFA are bringing World Cup to Vancouver, to Canada. And, that's always a question I pose is, what's the legacy? What are you going to leave behind? I mean, we've seen it with the 2010 Olympics. We have a whole village named after it, created. So I just hope in their plans with World Cup coming, there's FIFA's a big organization and they can leave a lasting impact. I hope some of that impact is infrastructure and will create opportunities for kids in sport.
Well, and speaking of FIFA, they're sort of a little bit notorious for corruption and human rights issues, especially with the alignment with Qatar recently. Do you think that that's going to be an issue when they come to Vancouver, or are we going to be able to overcome that here because we're a very inclusive location that is focused on supporting human rights?
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem here. But like I said, I'm a hopeful optimist. I don't think that'll be an issue here. You know how Canada is. You know how Vancouver is, very multicultural, very welcoming and inclusive. And FIFA's works hard to change that sentiment, to change that reputation. But it's tough. It's the world sport. They're trying to govern the world. Soccer goes from every corner. But yeah, I'm very optimistic that they'll come in and do the right thing and leave it a lasting impact.
I mean, I know a lot of people are really excited about it, so I like the optimism around it.
It's gonna be big.
I think, but truly, there's certainly the FIFA element of it, but we as residents of the city and of the province, we have autonomy in that as well, right? And so, I think once we have a better idea of all the activations and all those elements, right, that's where we'll, as individuals, and soccer organizations can know where we can help elevate those pieces, right? And so, yes, there are the matches, there are certain things that are FIFA driven, but there's so much outside of that is up to the host community. And I think Canada and Vancouver have been trailblazers in that, so I don't see why FIFA would be any different than the Olympics, right? And the Olympics and Paralympics, pardon me. So I think there's a huge opportunity for the city to show how it's done.
And I'm getting close to the end of my questions for you. So I'm wondering at this point if there's anything that we haven't talked about that you think would be really important to mention.
I don't know. It covers so many things.
Yeah, I don't know everything that's happening sort of internally within the organization. So if there's, you talked about this South Asian committee that's helping to advise the Whitecaps, maybe there's something else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up and make people aware of?
Yeah, I think the one thing, so, we've had through this conversation, we're talking about like the players and the fans, but I think also having a clear commitment to community and taking stands on social justice issues is also a unique and attractive factor for people joining the club, right? For people that want to work in the front office. It is sometimes a very demanding job, regardless of what department you're in, right? That it is, there's a lot going on. It's dynamic. The seasons are long, right? So it asks a lot of people, and to know that you're working for a club, that you support their values and know that they support you as, who you are as your authentic self and how you show up. And we try to show up in the community to reflect that. We've had so many staff, quietly come up and say like, hey, thank you for this, or we haven't acknowledged a particular holiday and it's important to my community. Can we do that? And of course, like that's, we were able to turn around and do something really quickly. But that's our best case scenario, where staff are saying like, hey, we've seen the efforts that have been made to support other communities. I would love if my community could get a little bit of that attention, a little bit of that glow. Could we do XYZ, right? That's where they know that that we're going to receive that feedback and move as quickly as we can. One of the coolest examples, and we shared this in a different conversation, was we had our women and girls match earlier this year. I feel like it was March. It feels like it's 6 months ago. And our design team, Ambar, Nicola and Rena, all female identifying, designed this like gorgeous version of our logo. And we had a clinic, soccer clinic before the match, and we had about 100 girls on the pitch, some who had never played soccer before, and they were gifted one of these shirts, right? And part of the idea is we didn't know what they were like, if they had sports equipment, right? So to make sure everyone felt like they could participate, we gave them one of these shirts with this design. And the teacher came back on that Monday and said, like, thanks, we had such a great time. They had 25 girls participate, and 18 of them wore that shirt to school on the Monday. And they were showing that shirt to all the boys and saying, this is to celebrate girls in sport, right? And like, not only was that like, oh my, like, what a goosebump moment for us, but then we were able to go and tell those designers, like, this is the impact your design has had on these young girls. And, you know, they couldn't believe it, right? They said that's some of the most impactful work they've ever done. And it gives them so much satisfaction and joy and pride in their work. So I think, yes, absolutely, our fan base, we want our players plugged in, but it should also be something that is reflective of our front office and the staff that comprise it.
Amazing.
Yeah,
It's a great story here. And one of the things that we like to end all of our episodes on is what our audience can do to help. So that could be getting involved in the organization to help you with the work that you're doing. It could be going out into community to further the causes that you care about. So what do you think our audience can do to help?
I would just start by saying, just do the right thing. You know, it's hard to tell someone to do one thing or the other, but my in the simplest form, just be a good human, you know, show empathy, show understanding, you know, help those in need. There's a way that you can maybe get out into your community, go to a local organization that, you know, resonates with you or that you feel a connection to. Just go and try to connect with them and try to just ask them if there's anything that you could do to help. You know, I've seen it with the players, and we ask questions. There's a wide variety of things that they want to do, but there's a community or a person or someone in need that aligns with this wide variety of things that they like or things that they want to impact. So just get out there, be a good human, do the right thing. I mean, it's as simple as that for me.
Wonderful.
From a club perspective, if people in your audience maybe haven't seen themselves reflected in sport, haven't felt safe or seen in sport, I, you know, would encourage them to maybe plug in a little bit more to the Whitecaps. And if you see an opportunity that we're speaking to you, and that if you haven't felt that sport is really your thing, I would hope after hearing some of the initiatives that we support and how our program is geared to supporting the community, hopefully they might, you know, follow us on social, be plugged in a little bit more to what we're doing, and hopefully see them that there's a space for them at the Whitecaps. There's a space for them at BC Place. And if they're still reluctant, to reach out to us, right? And if there's extra steps that they need to feel safe and comfortable in a Whitecaps environment, we want to know. And we have a lot of resources to, you know, whether we're talking about gender inclusive bathrooms at BC Place, like we can share these pieces. We can connect them in with some of the members of the supporters groups that we think they're going to, you know, really gel with, and they can help them through that Whitecaps experience. So understand sport has not always been a welcoming place. But we'd like to bring those individuals back to at least give us a try. And if we can help them along in that, you know, through conversations or connecting them with other people from the community that have created their own space and community in sport, in soccer through the Whitecaps, and we would love to be making those connections.
Fantastic advice from both of you. And thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. This has been a social justice podcast. I'm your host, Nicola Spurling, and today I've been joined by Tosaint Ricketts and Jennifer Scott for a conversation about the Whitecaps and professional sports organizations and how they give back. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nicola. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to a social justice podcast hosted by Nicola Spurling, brought to you by The Flag Shop, and inspired by a social justice coloring book.